PLC. And today we're meeting with Mike Carroll from Brightly, and we'll be covering e-waste and sustainability in tech. So Mike, please take it away. Feel free to introduce yourself.
Morena, everyone. Kia ora, my name's Mike Carroll, and I'm the founder and principal consultant with Brightly. We're a purpose-led IT solutions company based in Tamaki Makaurau. And yeah, it's awesome to be on the webinar and having a chat about all things tech and sustainability. Shall I just roll into it, Holly? And you
Go
can...
for it, Mike.
Yeah,
Yep, just roll
awesome.
in.
Yeah, cool. So I guess, yeah, it's an interesting one, sustainability and tech, and not always something that people think about together, but they're really, I guess, pretty critical topics that intersect a lot in our daily lives. And so when we founded Brightly, it was really around wanting to bring together the kind of social and environmental impacts that we were aware of in the world with what we could do as people that have worked in technology for a long time. And so when we started the company, we wanted to understand what does it look like to run a responsible company, and part of that was making sure that we're really walking the talk and understanding our impact. So back in 2020, we certified as a B Corp, which is a way of looking across your company at your governance, your workers, your environmental and community impact. And then in 2023, we also gained Toitū Climate Positive certification. So that's a process of going through and looking at not just your sort of company operations in terms of your carbon footprint and climate impact, but right across your entire supply chain, then setting targets and kind of looking, okay, well, how can we reduce our environmental footprint, and how can we, for the remaining kind of carbon impact that we have, how do we offset that? So through those journeys, we started to look more and more into IT and kind of where some of the impacts sat. It was quite an interesting process because we were already doing some quite awesome things, we thought, in terms of reducing our footprint as a company. So we've got a fleet of e-bikes for the team. We sort of subsidize public transport, which is all really, really good, and it's stuff that we'll continue to do, and it's got lots more benefits beyond just the climate. But one of the interesting things we found, we went through the certification process, was our supply chain, so the hardware and devices and things that we provide and the services we use, was 10 times the impact of our internal operations. So we started to have a lot more of a look at, well, what does that mean in terms of what are the choices that we have? How do we improve and reduce that? And so part of that journey then became, how do we look at e-waste in particular, and what's the opportunity there? What I might do, I'll see if I can share my screen. It may or may not work, so bear with me. All right. Do you want to just give me a thumbs up if that one's come up? All right. Excellent. All right. So this is some of our Brightly crew. And now we'll see if I can drive PowerPoint. Cool. So we talked a little bit about Brightly in terms of what we are, what we do. We help people with their technology strategy and provide services for companies. So talking about e-waste, really, when we looked at that impact, it's an interesting one, because as a company in New Zealand, we don't necessarily have a lot of choice around the kind of, how do we influence Microsoft or HP or Apple in terms of what goes into their products, what's the life cycle of those products, and what happens at the end of their useful life. When we started to have a look at the carbon footprint and the components of different devices, there's a couple of key things you can do. So there's a standard called EPEAT, which basically looks at how much kind of toxic material, how much recycled materials are within the devices that we use. There's carbon kind of life cycle assessments that look at the lifetime carbon impact of those devices. And then there's basically understanding the repairability and upgradability of what we use. In New Zealand, there's actually no kind of legislation around e-waste. There are kind of works in progress around it, but nothing confirmed. And there's also nothing around the right to repair devices. So a lot of what we use day to day, and even outside of IT, if you think about things like wearable watches or different types of wearable tech, or even dare I say it, vapes, are a huge source of e-waste now. And so it's an interesting landscape out there. It is a bit of a wasted opportunity as well, though. So if you think about the components that go into a lot of these devices, they all have to be sourced from somewhere. They all have to be mined. A lot of the devices that we use are built from combination of rare earth minerals, metals, plastics. That all of that material has to be sourced from somewhere. And then in many cases, those areas are quite like high conflict areas. If you think of rare earth minerals being mined in places like Congo, or places with quite low environmental standards. And so if we can determine how to recover some of that waste from existing devices rather than mining them at source, we can potentially reduce some of that impact. So one of the things we'll talk about, I guess, is the wasted opportunity that exists with electronics today. Just to give you a bit of an idea of the scale of the problem. So worldwide, over 62 billion kilos of e-waste was generated globally in 2022. That's increased from there. And so globally, that's about 7.8 kilos per capita. Now, of that, less than a quarter is getting recycled properly, which means that we've really got a huge way to go in terms of how we can sustainably manage those resources. The other impact from that, so you've got we're not recapturing those assets to reuse, but what also happens when those devices end up in landfill, a lot of those materials are potentially toxic, bad for the environment, bad for people. And in landfills that are not well managed, those can then leach out and impact the environment more widely. In New Zealand, just to touch on that, so we're actually worse than many places around the world because we don't have any legislation, less than, depending on kind of the stats that you have available, somewhere around 2% of e-waste in New Zealand is actually formally recycled in a properly managed way. And our e-waste per capita is over 20 kilos per person. So on a global stage, we're actually like doing really, really poorly. And I think we're one of the only countries in the OECD without legislation around actual proper management of e-waste, which is not great for a country that likes to pride ourselves on our environmental footprint. And at the moment, it's around 100,000 tons of e-waste that we produce annually in New Zealand. So that's a heck of a lot. And when you think, as this sort of illustrates e-waste, it's not just your laptops or your screens. It's basically everything that contains an electronic component. So your TVs, your dishwashers, your fridges, etc. There's a huge amount there.
So there's no kind of regulations at all about recycling any of this e-waste?
Correct, yeah. So there is some work underway now, and there's a collective of organisations in New Zealand who are working with the government to get that in place. But we're really, really slow in terms of getting that moving. The other type of legislation that's being proposed at the moment is right to repair. So in France and in some other countries in the EU, they're introducing legislation which is essentially forcing the manufacturers of these devices to ensure that they can be repaired by an end user or a licensed repair agent. And even as an initial step, getting some labeling across things so that when you go out and buy something, you can actually understand, well, can I replace the battery? Can I repair the screen? So you've got that knowledge up front. So in terms of e-waste, we'll talk a bit later around what we can do about this. But the key thing to understand is that it's a huge problem globally. A lot of these resources that we rely on to support our kind of modern lifestyle that uses these devices day in, day out, the source minerals are getting harder and harder to source. The environmental impacts are increasing, and the climate and water consumption involved in producing them is huge. So if we globally and as a country can get better at sourcing this, it'll have really positive impacts in terms of all of those environmental issues. So one of the other interesting things that we found working in technology is, I guess we've got the devices we use day to day. For most of us, though, the actual computing resources that we use are in the cloud. And so when we kind of think about that, it's like, oh, it's in the cloud. It's all just kind of happening. And it's quite an intangible kind of solution. We're like, oh, yeah, Google works. It delivers us instant search results. And now with AI as well, there's incredible things happening. The reality of cloud is that that's all still running on IT hardware. It's just happening in someone else's data center. And so all of those cloud computing resources are happening in someone else, sort of out of sight, out of mind. And it's I guess, a bit of a wake-up call in some cases to go, just because it's in the cloud doesn't mean it's not actually running on servers and storage and consuming valuable resources as well. What's been quite interesting in the last couple of years is that the major IT companies like Google, Microsoft, Meta have had some really ambitious climate targets, and they've been doing some fantastic work in terms of increasing the efficiency of the data centers that they run, the types of electricity that they source, how they manage the heat in those environments. So places like Iceland and Sweden have large data centers because the heat can be offloaded more easily. They're even doing things like they'll offload the heat from a data center and heat a residential area or pools, or yeah, some really kind of innovative things happening in that space. They also look at the way, so when you run a large data center, all that servers and storage, the heat that they generate, when you're cooling that, it tends to require a lot of water for cooling. And so that then consumes a massive amount of fresh water, which is another precious resource that globally is under pressure. With the newer data centers, they're looking at closed cycle water usage, so they're not constantly consuming more. And even I think some of the newer ones that are coming into Aotearoa are using air cooling and other techniques to reduce or completely eliminate the use of water in those data centers. All of that's been fantastic. But what's really put a bit of a spanner in the works in terms of that progress is the rise in AI. So again, AI, it feels like, yep, this stuff's magically happening. I can use ChatGPT or Claude or one of the latest AI models to help me create a speech about technology and sustainability, and it's awesome. It works really well. But in the background, again, all of those queries that we're running are running in data centers and consuming resource. So around 95% of AI usage is running on NVIDIA GPUs, graphic processing units. Those are consuming, so they have to be, the materials for those have to be mined, sourced, equipment built, produced into servers, built into data centers, powered, cooled. And if you think about the rapid growth in AI, that's a huge amount of new resource getting added into the mix. One of the really interesting things is when you look at the energy consumption within AI, it's massively inefficient for certain things compared to what we've been used to in the past. So over time, the energy efficiency and the power of CPUs and IT equipment in general has been producing better and better results based on lower and lower amounts of power. With AI, however, and the large language models that are used, the machine learning techniques, and the massive amount of both data storage and computational power, they need a huge amount more energy to run. So what this graph shows is if you are running a standard Google search, the little blue bar down there, compared to running a query through ChatGPT-4, GPT Max, it's massively more. So you're talking, I think on this, you're looking at well above 10 times the power consumption.
Yeah, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, yeah. Another example of this is basically how our global compute requirements. So what this is looking at is computing performance in petaflop days. So it's kind of how many processing units are used per day. And you'll see here this line just after 2012 is where GPU-based computing, so the start of neural networks, large language models, machine learning really started to take off. From that point, it's just that exponential growth in compute power that's been required to power those models. So what that means in the context of someone like Microsoft, so they've had, like I say, really ambitious and been making some really phenomenal progress in terms of the efficiency of their data centers, the way they source their power. A lot of offsetting, to be honest, goes into it as well, which is not as good as reducing the actual demand. But what's happened is, so the green dots are what the original plan was pre kind of OpenAI and the massive investment in AI tools. The black dots are what's actually happening now. So because of the massive uptake in AI and the increased power demands, something like 30% increase in power consumption and climate impact for Microsoft. Similar with Google and Meta as well. So this is an interesting kind of snapshot. It's comparing those three large tech companies with Slovenia. So a modern economy in the EU. There at Slovenia are achieving improvements and greening their power consumption. Meanwhile, the others, you can see they're just on a consistent rise in terms of that amount of power usage. It's phenomenal. So I did mention, it's not all doom and gloom in terms of that. There is a lot of work still being done to keep improving that. And that's one of the reasons why Microsoft and some of the other hyperscale providers are building data centers here. So New Zealand obviously has a relatively green power grid with around sort of 80% plus renewable energy in the electricity market. The Microsoft have partnered specifically with Ecotricity to guarantee that the data, so that the power is Toitū Carbon Zero certified and predominantly sourced from solar, wind, and hydro. So as those data centers come online here, that's helping Microsoft kind of even out some of that increased power consumption. Cool. So a lot of interesting things out there. I think the going to leave plenty of time for kind of Q&A shortly, but I just wanted to, I guess, follow through on a few things that we can all do, whether it's as individuals or as companies, in terms of reducing the climate and environmental impact of our technology solutions. One of the key things that we talk about with customers is, and this goes, again, it goes in your personal life as well. we're all like I love the latest tech as much as the next person, and the temptation's always there to go out and get the latest and greatest. But I think it's really good to think about, do you really need that extra device? Do you need a new one? Could you upgrade an existing device? If you do need an additional device, can you purchase off lease or secondhand? A lot of times now, and again, the reality of cloud computing is a lot of the work that we're doing is all happening in those data centers. So the devices we need day to day, they don't have to be supercomputers. They need to be reliable. They need to help us do our job. But they don't always need to be the latest and greatest. So thinking a little bit about, first of all, do you need that new device at all? The second thing is, when you are looking at buying those devices, having a look at, is it upgradable? Is it repairable? When we provide laptops to customers, we try and really encourage people to look at what's the device need to do today? What might it need to do tomorrow? How will you be able to extend its life? Things like being able to upgrade the drive or the memory in a device. Super simple if you've got an HP laptop and it's got everything's ready to go for an upgrade. If, on the other hand, you've got some of the earlier Microsoft Surface devices or MacBooks, MacBook Airs, incredibly hard, if not impossible, to upgrade as an end user. The other things that you can look at are the EPEAT ratings and the carbon footprints. So this does start to get a little bit more technical. You probably have to be quite motivated to go and find this information. It's not always made easy for you. But an EPEAT rating is essentially a bronze, silver, gold rating that says, how responsibly has that device been produced? What's the level of toxicity in the materials used? How well is the supply chain managed? And then the carbon footprint is looking at not just what was the carbon impact of manufacturing that device, but what is the likely footprint of that device over its lifetime. And so you can compare 2 or 3 options side by side and make a decision based around what's going to have the lowest climate impact if I purchase and use that device. The biggest thing you can do, of course, if you have got something, is to extend the lifetime of it. So if on average a laptop is used for 3 years, then its carbon footprint is going to be larger than if it was used for 5 years and you didn't have to replace it. So having a look at the regular maintenance and repairs that you can do. There's some really obvious things too, simple things like protective cases. So if you can have a case or a screen protector on your phone, that alone will, if you're anything like me anyway, will save 1 or 2 device replacements quite easily. And just keeping the maintenance going in terms of regular software updates and managing it well. The other thing to have a look at then when devices do get to the end of their life cycle is what you do with it. So what we are really keen on is ensuring that usable devices continue to go on. So if it's no longer suitable for you or the organization you work for, looking at whether it can be donated or on-sold, and then recycled through a trusted partner. Just a note on cybersecurity, you really do want to make sure that when you're doing that, you're working with someone who will either certify data destruction or you've wiped that device before you've passed it on. When it comes to AI, a simple measure is using the right tool for the right job. So we talked earlier about how a Google search compared to an AI tool is massively more efficient. So if you are tempted to use AI in your day-to-day life and it's helping you with your work, that's great. Again, separate conversation around security and privacy and things. But if you think in terms of a common Google search might be the US exchange rate to New Zealand dollars, or where do I find the closest sushi joint? Those things are 1,000,000 times more efficient. Okay, maybe 10, 15 times more efficient within Google than using AI. So use the right tool for the right job, and that'll just help reduce that cumulative impact of all of those queries that are being sent through the AI tools right now. Some pointers for different organizations that we work with and that you can work with. So Recycle a Device have an awesome nationwide program around getting devices out to people that don't have them. So really through their parent nonprofit Digital Future Aotearoa, they're really focused around digital equity in New Zealand. With Recycle a Device, you can essentially send through your laptops. They'll get them rebuilt, donated out to schools and people in need, and fantastic way of getting keeping those devices going and also helping provide access to technology for people that don't have it right now. ReMobile in a similar way for your mobile phones. You can send them in. They partner with the major telcos. They will recycle the devices, and awesome charities like Sustainable Coastlines will get some funding through that process as well. Echo are a awesome recycling partner, so previously known as Computer Recycling. They will help with the collection of any IT assets. They'll basically take anything with a plug. They can do the secure data destruction for you. And they've actually got an amazing facility where, so if a device has gone through, it can't be donated, it can't be sold, parts can't be used. They have an amazing blue box system where essentially the e-waste is broken down into its component parts, sorted into high value waste streams that can then be more effectively kind of pushed through offshore for reuse and recycling, which is fantastic. In a similar way, Abilities Group do asset recycling as well, and they also employ people with mixed abilities and kind of have a real strong social equity aspect to the work that they do. I've also just included Consumer in there. So Consumer are doing some work right now with the government around and have a petition around the right to repair. So something you can all do right now is Google Consumer NZ right to repair, have a look at the petition, sign it up. Basically what that's saying is we want to be able to, if we're buying a device tomorrow, we want to know what the repair options are and where we can go, how we can get it repaired, how we can extend the useful life of those things. And that's a wrap of what I had to chat to you all about. I'd love to have some questions. So yeah.
Thank you so much. And I think it's great that you've kind of given everyone those small tips that they can really implement to reduce their own e-waste in their businesses as well. That's really helpful. Yeah, we've had a couple of questions come through. Well, this one's not really a question. This is from Sonia, showing my age, but we still own a working VCR, showing my age, VCR from the 80s. Our first fridge lasted 30 years and only replaced it last year. They don't make things like they used to.
They sure don't.
They sure don't. Yeah. We had Rebecca from Recycle a Device just come through and say, thanks for the rad shout out. We've had, so Barbara has messaged in, she says, my company is a retail and wholesale refurbished iPhones and laptops company. It's www.aqw.co.nz. And meanwhile, they're supplying other retailers and repair shops with the phones, batteries, and accessories. Is there any chance we can cooperate on the refurbished devices and e-waste recycle?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I was actually, it's interesting really seeing that market for appliances and other electronic devices. So much as consumers, not even businesses, but so much, so often you're like, I don't even know where to get this repaired. I'd love to, like, personally, this is guilty admission. I've got a stockpile of stuff at home that I'm literally like, I can't bear to throw it away or e-waste it. Surely someone can repair it. And so yeah, I'd love to sort of have a look at those types of opportunities for sure.
Amazing. And we've had Jeanette come through with a question. Are your recyclers mentioned nationwide?
Yes, they are. And there's also an affiliation. So Echo are based in Auckland and Wellington. and there's similar facilities in Christchurch. When you start to go a bit further afield, there are, particularly for more consumer e-waste, a lot of places like the Warehouse and some of the other big retailers have collection facilities. And so they will partner with some of the major tech companies and provide that facility for you as well.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And Mike, what future technologies or practices do you believe will have the most significant impact on reducing e-waste?
I think to be honest, one of the largest impacts will actually be around the legislation. So at the moment, there's no real motivation for the manufacturers of these products to ensure that they can be repaired and replaced. There's some really interesting things happening overseas. So there's a product called the Framework laptop, which essentially is a modular laptop. So you can source replacement upgrades for just about every component of the device.
That's
And
interesting.
those things are becoming more and more feasible over time. Quite limited as to what we can get here in New Zealand, and it's similar in the mobile space. There are platforms which enable you to replace the component parts much more easily, and they also guarantee. So one of the big issues with a lot of technology is the built-in obsolescence, where essentially Apple will say we're going to stop upgrading the software on that phone or that MacBook after X number of years. And so even though the device physically might be operating perfectly fine, you're no longer getting the software updates, you're exposed to security risks, and you can't even, you can't run the latest apps because you can't upgrade the operating system. I think that behavior will only change when they're forced to. And so seeing some of the legislative changes come through, I think will be key. There are a lot, and I guess the promise of AI is that it will help us address some of these challenges through kind of new scientific discoveries and the pace of change, and that that is happening. It's just happening a lot slower than the kind of consumption. And there are some really interesting innovative companies. So one of them, Mint Innovation, Kiwi-based company, where they're actually producing a way to so when you have a computer motherboard, you've got kind of silicon and plastic, and then you've got gold and other precious metals for the circuitry. And Mint Innovation have pioneered a method of extracting all of those metals off the motherboards and essentially mining gold from e-waste. And so I think that type of thing is just fantastic. Like you think of that untapped resource that we're just throwing away right now. I think that's where we'll see, particular gains coming through.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And what are the primary sources of e-waste in tech today? Like, is there any devices more than others?
I mean, I mentioned vapes earlier. So within IT, mobile phones, tablets, laptops, are the devices that are kind of consumed the most. The server and storage infrastructure has an impact, absolutely, particularly the power running them, but they tend to be longer lived. But I think the hidden e-waste epidemic right now, to be honest, is vapes. There are some absolutely horrific statistics out of the UK around. So if you think of a vape as that nightmare combination of a battery, some electronics, and some plastic, and a lot of them are highly disposable. And so people are just chucking those into landfill every day. And the scale of it's frightening. So yeah, that would probably be the one that not IT specific, but yeah, it's definitely a massive source of e-waste right now.
Yeah. And can you share any stories, success stories, or case studies where like Brightly has significantly reduced the e-waste?
Yeah, so what we do is, I guess the primary thing we try and do is make it super easy for our customers. So we have a process that starts at the beginning in terms of those procurement decisions. So looking at what actually needs to be replaced. So we're not in the practice of going in and selling things just for the sake of it. And then looking at the choices. So making sure that the devices we're selling as much as possible are upgradable and repairable so that we're extending the lifetime of them. and then being really proactive in terms of working with customers to whenever we're going in there, whether it's having a look in the cupboard where people stash things away, or as we're replacing new devices, collecting those in. And so what we're able to do is collect devices from customers, work out which ones are suitable for recycling with, for donating with Bex and the Cruit recycler device. And then the remainder go to Ecotech, and they help with the secure wipe and disposal. And I think I'll probably get the numbers wrong, so I don't have it right in front of me, but it's something like close to, yeah, I think it was 940 kilos or something in the last year of e-waste that we've sort of managed just through our customers alone. So it's definitely, yeah, having an impact.
Amazing. And I'll just leave the floor open for a few more questions to come through. Well, Mike, thank you so much for sharing your mahi with us today. That's been extremely interesting. And so if you've got any other questions, please go to Brightly website, or how can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So brightly.nz, I'm on LinkedIn. So yeah, happy for you to pop a note through there as well. Yeah, thanks, Holly. Really appreciate it.
That's all right. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone watching today. If you have any further questions, you can go to support@digitalburst.co.nz, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, Mike.